Welcome to first Berserker Khazan Mad Man's demo impression. In my gaming prediction video for 2025 this game popped up, and from the videos available online I didn't rate it very highly. Of course, predicting anything is a wild guess with very little information at hand. I'm glad to say that it seems that the game will surpass my expectations, but not by much. This is going to be a much shorter video than usual because of time constraints, so buckle up you cel-shaded bastards. Khazan is a Souls-like action RPG that has some similarities to Nioh as well. It's a linear mission-based game, from what I've seen, that might play a lot like Nioh when it comes to story and mission progression. Immediately that's a bad thing, because it might focus on mission repetition to acquire gear like full sets. I hope I'm wrong in that there's not gonna be significant reasons to replay missions outside of pure desire to go through some of the stages again, or maybe because the boss is cool or whatever. Though it does smell Nioh-esque, especially when the gear starts dropping with tons of duplicates but with a different level. Sets are here too, which is the same mistake as Nioh, where some pieces of gear don't have any additional set bonuses but others do, making a bunch of gear obsolete right off the bat. To what degree the loot system is going to be like that I don't know, but I do hope that such similarities to Nioh are just superficial. RNG-based mission repetition in games like Nioh is one of the worst and cheapest designs in existence, because it artificially slows progression to a crawl in order to complete sets and whatnot, and usually such mission repetition is in games because there isn't enough quality content diversity and progression. It also kills pacing of the story and makes some games utilizing such methods quite disjointed. Story-wise, I can't say much because in the demo we only got to know the beginning. Khazan, a former general, got banished. He barely survives when being targeted by a demon that enters him. In the demo we are trying to get rid of that ghost, demon, whatever, and in the end, after defeating the bastard, an agreement is reached to help one another. Considering this is a revenge story with some lore behind it all, there might be interesting twists and turns. Or it can fail as Nioh did story-wise. There is a tiny bit of cringy anime dialogue, but overall it seemed like the writing managed to avoid going typical anime cringe by retaining the serious element. Mostly the vibe is serious and dark, so there's potential if there is deep lore, interesting characters and story events. Khazan seems like an interesting main character as well, especially all bloodied up like that. If they manage to create a good story, it might elevate the game a lot. As you've figured out by now, the game uses a cel-shaded graphical style that I like a lot. Game looks good, but there is evident texture popping that drags the presentation down quite a bit. I do like the snow stage that is in the demo quite a bit presentation-wise, walking in snow, making tracks and whatnot. It's a very linear stage with well-placed shortcuts and checkpoints, but in terms of details like environmental storytelling, pretty mediocre. Linear stages can greatly benefit from environmental details, points of interest, vistas and such, which this game doesn't really have at a high level. As you can see, there are many potential pitfalls outside of combat that can either take the game into the upper echelon, even though I'm seriously skeptical about that, or if it's going to be another average to decent experience. Combat is decent to good overall, nothing special, but plays out nicely. It's one of the things that I've said in the gaming prediction video. Can't feel the game through the screen. Combat was far from impressive in the presentation, but now with hands on the game, combat feels good. Impact of attacks is nice, animations are solid, sound effects are really good, even though over the top at times. There's blood, thankfully. 3 weapon types that feel and play uniquely. Mechanics like block, dodge, special attacks are well responsive. There's no attack cancel of any kind, not at the start, middle or end of the animation. For this game that works, because enemies are not super aggressive maniacal cheating arseholes. Instead, there's more than enough breathing room to plan the next attack, which adds an interesting layer to combat, especially against bosses that I enjoyed battling. Even when I died, it wasn't due to cheap bullshit, but due to me making a mistake or just not being concentrated. What Khazan does really fantastic in combat, which makes me wonder why more games don't make it so, is the discrepancy between light and strong attacks. Light attacks use way less stamina, but don't really damage stamina and poise of enemies, while heavy attacks are the opposite. Now most of you watching are probably thinking, look at Captain Obvious over here. Thing is that Khazan does it in a way that it's felt more than most other games I've played. Heavy is proper heavy, but it's gonna cost tons of stamina. It becomes a tactical choice against bosses when to use which attack type due to stamina consumption. There is nothing really wrong with combat. Sometimes there's a big speed discrepancy between actions that can bother some. Occasionally it bothers me as well. What I mean by speed discrepancy, for example, when attacking with normal combo there's a default speed, which is fine. Feels heavy due to the main character's first weapon being a combination of axe and sword, which is really an epic idea for dual wield combination. Then when Khazan dodges, it is extremely fast, practically instant. Or when unlocking combo moves between light and heavies, it can play out weirdly fast compared to normal combos. When Khazan walks, it's really slow, even though it might look like running. Sprint speed is fine on the other hand. So there's constant differences in speed between certain actions that make combat play out sometimes slow and sometimes fast. It works though, so it's not a negative for the game, but it is a bit weird. Character progression is pretty standard, some attributes, some skills and gear that can be part of a set. What I like is the fact we can reassign skill points whenever we want to supplement different weapons. Can't say at this point much more than that about the character progression because it's gonna depend how it all works and how deep it goes in the final version. Overall, first Berserker Khazan has the potential to not be just another game in this genre. It's gonna depend heavily on the writing, characters, enemy diversity, balancing, character progression and such. Combat is solid and can hold the game for some time even if other aspects end up being subpar or mediocre. But if developers choose Neo-style mission repetition with RNG grind, then developers have chosen mediocrity, because this combat style with such skill tree simply won't have enough in it to retain interest for long, like Neo could. I'll definitely play the game once it is released. Anyway, check out Patreon, subscribe, and merch in the description, and thanks for watching.